Good evening and welcome to the November 28th meeting of the Livermore City Council. I now call the meeting to order. Let the roll call show that all the members of the council are present and accounted for, with the exception of Councilmember Lorene Turner, who is excused. Let's see if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we have the report out of closed session. Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jason Alcala, your City Attorney. After closed session, the City Council has given its direction to initiate an action and pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.1, subsection A2. If the action is formally commenced at that time and upon request, I am authorized to disclose the action, defendants, and other particulars. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we move on to proclamations and presentations. We have an update from the Human Services Commission, which does a tremendous amount of work in the community, and certainly appreciate that. And who is going to be doing the presentation from the Human Services Commission? Looks like Ty is going to be
present. Sherry Ramirez is on her way, but she's running late.
Okay. Well, in that case, what we'll do is we will move ahead with the Citizens Forum,
Okay.
and we'll cover that, and then we'll double back for the Human Services update. So with that, I'd like to say that we're going to be moving a couple of items on the agenda. I wanted to flip 6.03 and 6.02. That's just a matter of the fact that one of the council members will be recusing themselves. So we will be hearing 6.03 first, and then follow that by 6.02, which that is going to be we'll be having the community choice aggregation will follow the discussion and direction regarding asset management. So just in case anybody's looking for those, we'll be doing that. Citizens Forum, I have Bruce Anderson, Lori Souza, and Clark Streeter. These are for items that are not on the agenda. The City Council can neither take action nor deliberate on anything, but we would ask also that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. So Mr. Anderson.
Good evening. Hopefully I can say this, but hopefully this is my Christmas wish. Mr. Mayor, council members, fellow citizens, my name is Bruce Anderson and I live at 1380 Meadow Court. Our city and region has a lot going for it, but also a few challenges. One is increasing population density and its associated traffic flow. 4 incidents this past week have prompted my appearance here this evening. 2 of the incidents were in last week's Independence. They were letters speeding where they talked about estimated 60-mile-an-hour traffic on 4th Street in central Livermore. Another one was estimated traffic at 50 to 70 miles an hour on Concannon. The third incident was a puppy that got out, and the speculation is that traffic cutting through residential neighborhoods doing an estimated 45, trying to get from, I'll say, one side of Livermore to Vasco North, which is a horrific bottleneck, apparently did a hit and run on a puppy. Apparently it was pretty obvious from the dog that, well, the sound of the dog that was bad. And then the fourth is 2 incidents I've had. I live on the northeast side of Livermore, and there are some times I'll take North Front Road, and I'm trying to do a left turn onto Herman and go into our neighborhood. And twice now, I've been stopped at that intersection to make the left-hand turn, And I've had a car pass over the double yellow line just as I'm about to turn left. They're passing over the double yellow line to continue up North Front Road. And I've almost gotten T-boned twice. And my neighbor across the street, well, one house over, he says it's happened to him too. During this summer's National Night Out, I asked an officer whether Mr. Trump's "we live in a nation of laws" stance would affect traffic enforcement. The officer kind of smiled and shrugged his shoulders. Another new trend, unfortunately, I've heard is citizens just blowing off laws they consider to be unenforceable. Where does that logic take us? Fortunately, the crime trends map has returned to the Livermore website, and hopefully the system is now automated, but sadly there are no metrics on traffic violations, such as speeding, running stop signs, passing over double yellow lines, passing over double yellow lines, etc. I hear the timer. May I go on for just a little more? Okay. Possible solutions include public service announcements, playing poker, saying, hey, we're going to enforce the laws, but not actually do it, which is kind of what we're doing, or actually enforcing the laws. And hopefully, the bottom line, again, sadly, is it's not a matter of if a child gets killed, it's a matter of when. So, it's something with the rising density. I see these houses so close to each other and all the traffic, and all you have to do is drive anywhere, and you see it. But, when are we actually going to get some people to start saying, hey, we need to slow down? So again, it's my Christmas wish. Many thanks for your time and hopefully your support, and happy holidays.
Mr. Anderson, thank you. And I've noticed that the chief is taking, chief of police is taking notes in the back there. Thank you. The guy in the maroon shirt.
Incognito tonight.
Yes. Lori Anderson and Clark Streeter. Is tomorrow Giving Hawks Day?
Yes, it is. It's Lori Souza. So good evening, Mayor Marchand and the city council members and city staff. Tonight, I'm representing the Las Positas College Foundation Board of Directors. And tomorrow is Giving Tuesday, also Giving Hawks Day at the campus. It's a national day of giving on Tuesday following Thanksgiving. And I want to thank Mayor Marchand for your proclamation encouraging all citizens to join together to give back to the community in any way that is personally meaningful. And I want to especially thank Vice Mayor Stu Gary, who presented the proclamation to the Las Positas College faculty and staff earlier in November. So I won't read it, but I will say that whereas it is fitting and proper on Giving Tuesday and on every day to recognize the tremendous impact of philanthropy, volunteerism, and community service in the city of Livermore, I want you to know how much we appreciate your support. There are many Tri-Valley nonprofits participating in Giving Tuesday this year, so your assistance with this is wide-reaching and impactful, so thank you.
Well, Las Positas does some tremendous work for the community. So what's the website that they can donate on that? Hashtag Giving Hawks Day.
Takes you right to our donate button.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Giving Hawks Day. Mr. Streeter.
Clark Streeter, 457 Tyler Avenue, Livermore. Sorry Lorraine's not here because this concerns her. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Council Members Stu Gary and Lorraine Turner for their service to the community. I have found both of them to be thoughtful and sincere members of the City Council, and I will miss them. I also think that there was no reason to replace them on the Council. Based on what I've heard them say in public meetings and private conversations, I believe that they were responding to public input concerning the downtown development. And I think that the plan that the Council and the City staff eventually proposed would have been well received by the public. However, their comments, as well as comments by the mayor, were seriously underreported in the local press, so the public was easily influenced by negative and misleading information about their intentions. There was also little attempt by the media to explain the actual process that has to be observed by elected officials and city staff. Nonetheless, it is what it is. I can only hope that the new City Council members turn out to be as sincere and independent-minded as Stu and Lorraine have been, and I wish them well. Thanks again, Stu and Lorraine.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. Okay, moving back to the 2.01, the Human Services Commission. Has the Human Service Commission chair arrived yet?
She has not.
She has not. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. These are routine items typically passed with a single motion. Does anyone wish to pull any of the items for consent? Okay, they are typically passed with a single motion. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Mayor Gary, seconded by Councilmember Warner. Any discussion on the motion? Any opposition or abstentions?
Any cards?
No cards. Passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to 5.01. This is a hearing to establish a community facilities district for the 2016-2 for Shea Properties. These are the public hearings in this council's proceedings for community facilities district, as I said, 2016-2 for Shea Properties. The hearings are to inquire into the formation of the district, the levy of special taxes in the district, and the need to incur bonded indebtedness within that district to refinance the cost of public facilities by refinancing certain outstanding bonds that are secured by and payable from special taxes levied by the district. So this is a public hearing. I have no cards, so I will open the public hearing. Having no cards, I'll close the public hearing. So at this time, if anyone wishes to file a written protest or submit their ballot, please file it with the clerk now. Oral protests and or comments will be heard after presentations by staff and the consultants about the district. If you wish to address the council during public comment, please submit a blue speaker card and submit it to the clerk. Okay, I don't have any cards. I don't have any
Okay,
comments.
Mayor Marchand, so we're going to, it's a little bit different than our normal public hearings, so we need to reopen the hearing, and then staff and consultants will be making a presentation, and then we'll call for any additional ballots that may be out there and any comment that.
Okay, after
like to do.
the staff.
Yeah, so please reopen the
Okay.
hearing. Thank you.
Well, what I will do is I will ask for staff to make the comments, and then I'll reopen the hearing. Mr. Alessio.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Doug Alessio. I'm the Administrative Services Director. I'll keep the comments brief. The item tonight is to refinance a piece of existing community facilities district debt. The debt was originally issued in 2006 to build public infrastructure. We're looking to refinance it to save the property owners in the district about $1.2 million over the life of the debt issue. And that's all I have to comment.
Okay, thank you. And I might add that there's 230 pages of staff reports on this. So any money that we've saved, we spent on paper. With that, I'm going to open the public hearing. Having no cards, I'm going to close the public hearing. We may now consider and adopt the resolution of formation of the Community Facilities District, which will establish the district, the resolution determining necessity to incur bonded and other indebtedness, which will determine the need to issue bonds and incur other debt to refinance the outstanding bonds, and the resolution calling special election, which will then call for the property owner vote to approve the special tax, the proposed bonded indebtedness, and the appropriations limit for the district. Does the council have any questions at this point? Let's see. There's no discussion. So, do we have the?
Resolutions.
Pardon me?
We'll need motions to adopt the next three resolutions.
Have we taken the ballot?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So the relations are okay. So it's before that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So. I would like, so I do have a motion to adopt the following resolutions. The resolution of formation of the Community Facilities District. Can we do them all at once? Okay. The resolution determining necessity to incur bonded indebtedness and other indebtedness, and the resolution calling for the special election. Oh, there we go.
Yes,
for the
those
special
three.
election. So I can, all those ones?
So moved.
Moved by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilmember Warner. So at this time, we will take a short recess. And during the recess, I will ask the city
I'm
clerk.
sorry, Mr. Mayor. We need to call for a vote on that motion.
I'm sorry. It's not in the script here. Okay, so all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? It passes unanimously. Then announce this time we'll take a short recess, and during the recess, I will ask the city clerk to open and tabulate the ballots. The results of the election will be announced when the meeting reconvenes.
Thank you. It should only be about 5 minutes, so
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. And the city clerk announced the results of the election.
Okay, the results of the elections are as follows. We had 41 votes in favor and 0 against.
41 in favor and 0 against?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, the results of the election, actually were unanimously in favor of the levy of the special taxes, the establishment of the appropriations limit, and an incurring of bonded and other indebtedness. We may now proceed with the adoption of the resolution declaring results of special election and directing recording of notice of special tax lien. So, do I have a motion to adopt the resolution declaring the results of the special election and directing the recording of the notice of special tax lien?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Spadowski.
Seconded.
Seconded by the Vice Mayor. Okay, so the next action is for the introduction of an ordinance.
Need to call for the vote.
Don't do both of those at once?
Just if we do the resolution, then we'll have a second one for the introduction of the ordinance.
Okay, very good then. Okay, so all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passed unanimously. The next action for the district is for the introduction of an ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Livermore levying special taxes within the City of Livermore Community Facilities District number 2016-2, Shea Properties. Do I now have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Spadowski, seconded by Vice Mayor Warner. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It passed unanimously. Thank goodness I've got a great city attorney here that keeps all this stuff in line here. Okay, now that the formation proceedings for the district are complete, we may consider and adopt the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of special tax refunding bonds and approving and authorizing related documents and actions, which will authorize the bonds to be issued by the district and approve certain related documents. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Spadowski, seconded by Councilmember Warner. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? It passed unanimously. So we're done. Okay. Thank you very much. It was a little more complicated than most, but this way I'm assured that we got it right. So that's good. Okay, now we move on to 5.02, which looks to be equally, if not more so, complicated. This is the hearing to consider the formation of Assessment District 2016-2, the Pleasant View annexation. Okay, so this is the public hearing for the City of Livermore Assessment District number 2016-2, Pleasant View annexation. Oral protests and or comments will be heard after the presentations by staff and the consultants about the district. If you wish to address the council during the public hearing, please complete a blue speaker card, which is over in the doorway. Next, the city clerk is over there. Submit that blue card to the city clerk, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes to address the council. If you do not wish to speak, but want to submit written comments, you may do so at any time before the close of the public hearing. Please give your written comments also to the city clerk. They will be part of the administrative record for this hearing. If you have not mailed your ballots, you may give them to the city clerk at any time before we close the public hearing. If you need a replacement ballot, they are available here tonight from the clerk. Just before we are ready to close the public hearing, I will ask again for any more ballots. So please be sure to mark and sign your ballot before you turn it in, since unmarked or unsigned ballots cannot be counted. Once the hearing is formally closed, no more ballots may be presented. The assessment ballots will be tabulated after the hearing is closed. The ballots will be tabulated by the clerk. Under law, the ballots are disclosable public records and open for inspection during and after the tabulation. The assessment ballots are required under Proposition 218. The ballots are weighted based on the dollars to be assessed on each parcel in the district. If there is a majority protest from those actually submitting ballots, the assessment process is ended and we cannot take any further action upon it. If there is not a majority protest, the council will have the authority to approve the assessments. Approval by the ballot process does not automatically levy the assessments. For that reason, any oral or written remarks about the assessment district will be considered by the council, but will not count as part of the formal Proposition 218 ballot approval process. This evening, we will formally open the hearing. There will be a brief presentation by staff about the assessment district and a discussion of the engineer's report. Next, we will receive oral presentations. If you ask questions, they will be answered after everybody has had a chance to speak. Depending on the number of questions, we may have a short break to compile replies to those questions. After that, I will again ask for any more ballots and then close the hearing. Your patience and cooperation is sincerely appreciated. The public hearing is now open, and on that, I will ask staff for their presentation.
Mayor and council members, my name is Sherry Sheets. I'm your city engineer. Tonight, council is conducting a public hearing to consider formation of the Pleasant View Annexation Assessment District. The district is being formed to provide a financing mechanism for sewer and roadway improvements within the district. Council initiated this process back in September. The area of the district is located east side of Arroyo Road, about midway between Robertson Park Road and Concannon. The neighborhood is an island of unincorporated county properties. These properties are all on septic systems, several of which are already failing. The increased state regulatory requirements aimed at preventing public health and safety impacts, including groundwater pollution and prevention and direct contact of humans with human waste, makes replacement and maintenance of septic systems more onerous, if not impractical. The district includes 24 buildable parcels, 2 of which are in the city, and that's the 2 that are on Quail Court. I don't know if I can get those 2. The total cost of the improvements, including easement acquisition, sewer main line, which will go both along Arroyo Road and Pleasant View Lane, Arroyo Road curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and then the emergency access improvements along Pleasant View, total $1.4 million. The city has contributed over $100,000 towards the cost of formation and annexation, and the county is contributing $350,000 towards the infrastructure costs. Per the engineer's report, individual assessments are assigned based upon each parcel's special benefit. The assessments range from $30,000 to $72,000. The district will allow property owners to pay their assessments over a 30-year period. In order to form an assessment district, the property owners within the district must vote. In accordance with district law, each vote is weighted based on the parcel's assessment amount. Ergo, if your assessment is $30,000 and mine is $60,000, my vote counts twice as much as your vote. If a majority of the ballots cast tonight are against formation of the district cannot be formed. If, however, a majority protest does not exist, then the council can consider formation of the district. Tonight, the first thing you'll be doing is conducting the public hearing and considering input from the property owners. After that, you'll tabulate the ballots. If a majority protest does not exist, then the council can consider items 2 and 3, which are adoption of the engineer's report and actual formation of the districts, and then item 3, issuance of the bonds. That concludes my presentation. Both our bond counsel and MBS, our financier, is available for any questions.
Any questions for staff at this point? So you're saying that the county is actually putting up $350,000 for this?
Yes.
Have they ever done that before?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's unusual. So okay, so that's all right, very good. Thank you. Okay, so with that, I am going to. No questions though. Okay, so any questions at this point? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the public hearing. This is the final call for ballots. So if you got a ballot, now's the time to submit that to the city clerk. City clerk's right there.
Right there.
The one behind the computer. Just under the wire. Don't stand in front of the camera. Okay, very good. It's all part of the public record, right? So we've got the, so it just needs to be marked and signed, correct? All right, so that'll make it official. All right, so last chance for public comments and for the ballots. Okay, the public hearing is now closed, and I would ask that the city clerk tabulate the ballots, and these are by weight. They're weighted ballots. So with that, we're going to take another short break here, folks. So I greatly appreciate your patience, but this is a little bit unusual, and it just takes a few moments here. So thank you. All right, so in that case, I'm going to call the meeting back to order, and I'll ask the city clerk to please announce the results of the election.
The results of the elections are as follows. In favor is 50.53%. Number against was 49.47%. So no majority protest exists.
Wow, it's a squeaker there. Not to the 100th decimal place. Okay, now that there is no majority protest, the council will consider a resolution adopting the engineer's report, confirming the assessment, and ordering the work and acquisitions and directing actions with respect thereto. So with that, do I have a motion? Okay, moved by Councilmember Warner, seconded by Vice Mayor Gary. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? It passes unanimously. Now that the assessment district has been formed, we will consider a resolution authorizing the issuance of limited improvement bonds for the assessment district. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Spadowski,
Second.
seconded by Vice Mayor Gary. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstentions? That also passes unanimously. All right, so we have a new assessment district.
Mr.
And
Mayor,
we can
if I
get
may.
those people off of the septic tanks and see an improvement in the groundwater quality out there.
Mr. Mayor, if I may as well. As mentioned in the staff report, this particular action, both the formation of the district and its assessment, are eligible for validation by the court to confirm that both the district and the assessment were validly formed, and the city attorney's office does intend to pursue that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to matters for consideration. This is the financial update report. This is the comprehensive annual financial report, the CAFR. Mr. Alessio.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Doug Alessio, your Administrative Services Director. Tonight, the item before you is to accept the city's comprehensive annual financial report, also known as its CAFR, and to give you a brief update on the fiscal year end June 30th, 2016, and the first quarter of fiscal year 16-17. So tonight, in your packet was the city's comprehensive annual financial report. We received an unqualified audit opinion from the auditors. Unqualified means that's a good result. Sometimes folks get confused with the wording there. Unqualified means that their opinion, our financial statements are fairly presented. Our financial report implements GASB 72, a fair value measurement this year. And again, the report was produced by staff in-house and audited by our independent auditors. Yes, sir.
And if I could just point something out, the cover of the CAFR, that's actually a mural that is at the Premium Outlets. It's a spectacular mural. It goes the whole height of the building. So if you get a chance, that's quite a spectacular building and mural.
Thought it made a pretty good cover.
Yeah,
so.
it's very nice.
All right. So GASB 72 doesn't have very much impact on our financial statements. For us, the results of GASB 72 are reflected on page 71 and 72 of the CAFR. It has to do with the fair market value we carry our investments at. There's not a whole lot of impact other than to give the reader some comfort as to where the fair market value came from and that it's an acceptable fair market value. We also produced for the second year popular annual financial report. This report is it's a condensed version of the CAFR. It's intended to help a layperson, somebody who's not in the financial field, understand what the city's doing with its finances and our operations. This is not part of the resolution, but is presented as an attachment to the staff report because it's not a required document. Okay, the other reports, you have a Measure B report, a Measure BB, a Horizons report, a single audit report, an memorandum on internal control. All those other reports that are attachments to the resolution are required by law. The PAFR is just a communication tool, so it's just an item to for a purpose. It's not required, but we think it helps communicate with the residents how the city's doing. We produced this for the first time last year, and we won the Government Finance Officers Association Award for the PAFR, which has criteria of creativity, of presenting the information correctly, and of a unique display of financial information. So it's a pretty neat document, and we hope that it engages more of the public in an awareness of the city's finances. This is the general fund budget that was adopted in June of 16. We do a biannual budget, so I just wanted to bring everyone's attention back to the budget that was adopted. Showed that we anticipated for 15-16 that the city would have a little bit more than $2 million of excess of revenues in excess of expenditures. We were supposed to have about $98.7 million of revenue, 96.5 of expenses, meaning that our fund balance would grow by about $2 million. And for 16-17, we're expecting our fund balance to grow by a little bit more than $315,000. So the actual results for the year are much better than that. I'll start with the revenues. You'll see that although we had budgeted for about $98.7 million of revenue, the city actually received about $103.8 million in revenue. So that's the first $100 million year that the city of Livermore has ever had. That's pretty cool. That was on the strength of the economy. Clearly, we had more property tax than anticipated. The sales tax came in really strong too. We had one item in there that's a one-time item. The unwinding of the triple flip with the state resulted in a catch-up payment, which boosted our sales tax revenue one time by about $800,000. But that accounts for a majority of the increase over what we had anticipated. The biggest overage is lumped into other revenue, but a majority of that has to do with development-related revenue. This is revenue for fees for services, for the different development going on, and also development-related revenue like transient occupancy stays or business license tax on in residential construction or commercial construction. The other place where we exceeded budget was in the use of money and property. We did slightly better on our investments and on some of our rentals than we had anticipated. We actually fared a bit better, $5 million more in revenue than we had originally thought. Yes, sir.
I think this is critical. Our ongoing, if the economy stays strong, sustainable increased revenue is the 746 and the 1.4 million.
No.
Because, well, no, let me keep going. Less than that, because your other revenues are offset by costs in the budget. Those are fees for development costs we encumbered. So that in theory is net zero. So what to the public's perspective, what is our net property sales tax increases year to year?
So I'm going to answer a slightly different question. What I think you're asking is, if the economy wasn't a factor, what would you actually anticipate our revenue would be if we weren't experiencing a robust economy?
No, I'm just saying you projected property and sales tax that came in higher. I want that broken out from the other revenue, which is encumbered by development expense offsets. We got fees in because we're growing, but the fees go right back out in charges of staff and consultants to process development. So the money in excess of projections is the 746 variance in property tax and then 1.4 million in sales tax.
Yes.
Totaling a little over 2 million. The 5 million sounds like a fantastic number, but the ongoing reoccurring growth in revenue base is only a little over $2 million.
And a portion of that 1.4 million, as you heard Mr. Alessio say, was a one-time $800,000 reciprocal of the triple flit. Other revenue does have some essentially fees in there which are slightly more recurring, but your take that essentially the more stable part, the non or the recurring part of that revenue is less than $2 million out of the 5, and a smaller portion or another portion, the $3 million, would be essentially considered closer to one-time revenue related to costs that will be incurred to handle that, and basically related to the point in the economic cycle where we are. As you remember, we are above the trend line at this point in the economic cycle, and so that's why you are seeing revenues come in over that trend line. This is exactly what we would expect. Another question which we will be bringing back to the council at the beginning of the year is, overall for revenues and expenses, the difference between the more cyclical piece and the more stable pieces of those. And that actually does require a lot more teasing out. Your point is a start on that, but there are about a half a dozen other points that we need to spend some more time on. But I think it's very well pointed to say, yes, there is some growth in the base, but it's certainly not $5 million. You're not going to get additional $5 million. Nope.
And just to underscore one of Mr. Roberts' points is there is no extra money. This is just excess, but there's no extra. And just to underscore the fact that I believe it was our property tax revenue dropped 20% during the recession, and our sales tax dropped 26%.
You have a good memory.
So that was, so yeah, we're doing very well right now, but the reason that we have our capital reserve is so that we can survive recession drops in revenue similar to that. So yeah, we're looking good right now, but recognizing that it wasn't that long ago that we saw a 26% drop in sales tax.
Well, here's your drop in property tax. So, and property tax is a fairly stable revenue source. Even during a recession, it usually just flattens out. Instead of dropping, the last recession, it actually dropped, so fairly significantly. But we're, of course, back above the pre-recession levels at this point.
I remember we lost 20% of our staff during that period of time, so it was very painful to just live through that.
Yes, it was. Here's a historical shot of our sales tax revenue, a bit more volatile than the property tax, and you can see it definitely reacts to what's happening in the economy. All right. Here's our uses side. We'd expected to spend about $96.5 million. We actually spent $94.2. A majority of that has to do with capital improvement that, due to timing and other delays, did not happen earlier this evening. You took and re-encumbered that money into this year. So taking that into account, we came in under budget by about $300 and some odd thousand. If you take and exclude the savings of CIP. So our salaries and personnel costs came right in on budget, and so did our supplies and services. All right. So just a comparison against budget. Again, we'd expected the fund balance to grow by a little bit more than $2 million, and it'll actually grow by about $9.6 million. All right. So what does that do to our reserves? Our reserves are comprised of non-spendable, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And so last year we had about $37 million in reserves. This year it'll be $47 million. It includes the $2 million that you approved for the infrastructure replacement and also the CIP rollover, which means that you've met your target policy and you actually have excess unassigned fund balance. Your policy says you need to keep at least 1.5% in unassigned for items that unforeseen items that may come up during the year, and we actually have 12.3% available. So this is a graphical representation of your fund balance reserves since you adopted the policy in 11-12. So we've gone a long way towards restoring the reserves that we burned through in the economic downturn. All right. So the first quarter of fiscal year 16-17, just going to give you the disclaimer and warning like I do every year at this time. Revenues are not come in evenly throughout the year, so revenues will be look a little bit slim, but this is actually very typical through the first quarter of the year. And then our operating expenses are about this on track. They're a little bit behind the 25 percentile. If you take a closer look, we've actually had 26 pay periods, which is 23% of the year, and our personnel services are tracking slightly below that due to some vacancies, and the rest of our expenditures are on target. So that just brings us to, some future concerns. As always, there is no extra money. Just a heads up in the future, our employment costs are about 75% of our budget. So we spend 75 cents out of every dollar directly on employees and employment-related expenses, whether it's benefits or taxes. So some of the items that will drive that in the coming year or in 2 years are CalPERS rates. They are going to spike quite a bit over the next 3 or 4 years as they do the smoothing assumptions, the mortality assumptions, and the de-risking of the portfolio. We have the Affordable Care Act Cadillac tax. It's kind of in limbo because of the national election. Don't know how they're going to implement this. We had estimates it was going to cost the city anywhere between $3 and $5 million a year, the Cadillac tax. So we'll see how we move forward on that item, but that's a concern. That would be an annual hit, and we'd have to figure out how that fits into our structure. But the federal government's still trying to figure out what to do there. We have 4 labor contracts that open in 2017. So all 4 of our bargaining units, labor contracts are up in the next 12 months, and we'll be renegotiating those. And then we also have the additional staffing needs. So those are all future concerns related to employment costs. We also have variable rate debt, as you're aware, and I suspect at some point we're going to see inflation and have to start paying a bit more interest, and just an increase of 1% or 2% in our interest rate will cost us a lot of money. So it bears watching. When it appears that interest rates will start climbing, we will refinance into fixed rate debt at that point. But it is going to be a concern. We'll monitor, and eventually when we switch over, the cost of our debt service will increase if you peg it into a fixed rate piece of debt. You're going to hear a little bit more about infrastructure replacement later tonight. That is another area where we've underfunded a long-term liability, and we need to make sure we take whatever resources we can and start addressing that need. And of course, I've been warning of this, and we are now in the third longest economic expansion in U.S. history. There is a downturn. It is coming, and part of the reason why you have the reserve policy is so that we can get through the next downturn without a reduction in services and programs and staffing. So if you have any questions, I'm available to answer them.
And as I recall, one of the main indicators that a recession is coming is when they announce that there's no recession coming. Is that correct? And that came out
Denial,
over the summer.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Questions? Question for staff at this point?
Just a comment.
Okay.
As has been my observation for several years, you're just doing a wonderful job on this, and congratulations again on a great report, and good, keeping us well guided through the financials.
Councilor Spadowski?
And ditto to that as well. This is something that, with the I guess PAFR and the COFR, these are documents that I'll go throughout the year. It's going through it once or twice over the weekend just doesn't really do it justice to all the information that you're providing. It takes a while to absorb. One of the suggestions that I would have on the PAFR is including maybe like a definition of terms in the back. So if people want to look at, general fund, what is it, like a quick defining some of the terms, and maybe also listing some of the acronyms either in the front or the back to make it a little bit more user friendly. Although we do say, this is what a general fund is at one point, it might be good to have it in the back in case people need to. Because I think at times we hear these terms over and over again and we become indoctrinated and you just forget. And in particular with local government, you start speaking in acronyms and people, they just kind of glaze over when they're not used to it. So we're part of the collective, I guess you would call it, so something to define, unless there's you're following certain set
It's an
guidelines.
excellent suggestion, and it's something we can actually incorporate into this year's PAFR.
Okay.
So I'll talk with my finance manager about that and see if we can get the document that's attached to the staff report updated and maybe include some of that information at the end.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
So I had one other minor thing, but as I go through the financial readouts, and it's always, well, at this time of the year, you don't expect to have spent the full amount, and this is always less and this is more, and things like that. Is there any way, I know we don't necessarily budget on a monthly basis, but when you show a partial year results, is there any way to actually show a number next to what happened to make it easy for people to understand whether it's on track or not?
Sure. I can show historical trends. Hey, through the first quarter of the year, the last several years, this is where we were. So you can compare where we are this year versus that.
Yeah. So in other words, I like that. You take an average over a few years. At this point in the year, we would have spent X percent of this amount or gotten this much X percent in, and we currently got Y, and it's within the variance of the expectation or something.
Certainly can.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, I have no cards, so there's no public comment. So with that, do I have a motion to receive the report and adopt the resolution? Moved by Councilmember Warner.
Second.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Gary. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? It passes unanimously. Great report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's hard to make that information warm and fuzzy, but you managed to make it understandable, so greatly appreciate it. Thank you. With that, I'm going to step back a little bit to 2.01 as the representative from the Human Services Commission here.
No, it looks like she is
Still stuck in
not
traffic.
able to show this evening. So we,
Okay.
we might reschedule that.
Okay, I just thought I'd circle back on that one just in case. Okay, moving on. As I said, I was going to flip 6.02 and 6.03. So with that, I'd like to go into the asset management program, 6.03. And that's the discussion direction regarding asset management for buildings. And we'll have the staff report by Sherry Sheets and Anthony Smith, and a consultant to be named later.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Anthony Smith. I'm a management analyst in the Public Works Department. And with me tonight are Colin Chung from Cayuga Solution, our consultant, and Sherry Sheets, our city engineer. We're here tonight to give an update on the progress of the buildings portion of the asset management program. So just a quick reminder on the steps that we've taken so far in the program. In November of last year, we awarded a contract to Cayuga Solution for the development of the program. Early this year, we provided an introduction to the methodology and the process behind the program development. We also included renewal and replacement information in the CIP. This was designed to show the split of the funds between renewing and replacing existing assets and enhancing or expanding or creating new assets. We also presented a risk-based pavement management methodology in June, and then in July we formed the committee, the Community Asset Management Program Committee. And the CAMP committee was formed to generate some community input and also to review pieces of the asset management program as we progress. So one of the main pieces of the asset management program is creating prioritization methods for our different assets. So for the buildings, we're proposing a risk-based prioritization method, which is based primarily on the consequence of failure. So when an asset fails, when it stops working, how bad is it? How bad of an impact does it have? And then also the probability of failure, which could also be looked at the timing. So is it gonna fail soon, or is it gonna be quite a bit until it fails? Our consultant has inventoried over 50 buildings and 8,000 assets. I mean, again, these are all buildings which are funded by the general fund. So at the building level, we want to create kind of a schema for criticality. So we look at the buildings, and we're proposing to break them into 3 categories. Those categories are essential or core city services. These are things like police, fire, city hall, things that are vital to the city and what we'd consider to be kind of the core mission. Then the other 2 categories are for enrichment. So things that enrich the quality of life and then are either in a high or general usage state or in a specific usage. And both of these enrichment categories can include some of the historical buildings as well. Okay. In addition to the building level criticality, we also have an asset level criticality. So unlike a lot of some of our other assets, the buildings are going to be kind of a conglomeration of assets within it. So this building would be the carpeting, the ceiling, the roof, the HVAC, all these different things. So in order to take the importance of the building into effect, we're going to couple that with the asset level criticality. So the assets, individual assets within the buildings, run the gamut from things that are mission critical or things that we can't do our jobs without, all the way down to things that are non-essential. Things that are nice to have, they improve the buildings, but aren't necessary, strictly speaking. So to help prioritize these different assets and figure out where the money can go, we're going to take all 4 of these factors and create a risk score for each asset. So this risk score, again, is going to include the consequence of failure, the probability of failure, the building level criticality, and the asset level criticality. And this risk score really is the basis for that prioritization. Since buildings have a long life, a lot of the replacement over time is going to take place at the asset level. You're going to be able to, replace the roof on a building a few times before you actually need to replace the building. But eventually, the building is going to need to be replaced. So in order to help understand this, especially the need and the timing for the replacement, we wanted to create some full building replacement criteria. So these are kind of questions that we'd go through to look at a building and evaluate, is this something that we should pay attention to when it comes to replacing, or is this something that we've got more time on? So these criteria are grouped by different modes of failure. So the mortality mode is when an asset can no longer perform the function that we need it to do. The functionality would be how well does the asset perform what we want it to do. Code compliance, of course, is compliance with building codes and such. And then financial efficiency. So there's a point at the building where we may want to go ahead and replace it, even though it's not used up completely. So in the mortality section, the first criteria is asset consumption. So is the average remaining useful life of all the component assets lower than 20%? So this is an average looking at all the assets within a building to see how much of it is used up. So that means in this case, of course, 80% of the asset would be used at that stage. The next criteria would be remaining life of the structural components. So these are the pieces of the building. While they have an expected life, they really can't be replaced on their own. We really can't take the structure of the building out and reuse the components. So do the structural components of the building have an average remaining useful life of less than 7 years? The 7 years was chosen to give us sufficient time to go through the planning, the design, the bidding, the constructing, and then the occupying of the building. So in order to do that, we figured 7 years was a good time window to allow us to do that. In the functionality category, how well does the building serve its required function? Does the building meet capacity requirements? And does the building align with city strategic goals or vision? In the code compliance section, does the building meet required building codes? Does the building meet health and safety codes? And does the building meet Americans with Disability Act access guidelines? And then under the financial efficiency, does the cost of replacing the high-risk component assets exceed 75% of the total building replacement cost? Now this is a different criteria from the asset consumption because we're really focusing on the most critical pieces of the building. And this helps us determine if this is a good time to replace the building, maybe even a little quicker than we might otherwise. So we took these criteria and we ran all of the core city service buildings through it. We also ran a selection of some of the other buildings. The intent would be to run all the buildings through it as we continue to develop. But we can see that some of the core facility buildings, a lot of them are in pretty good shape. So in this case, green is good, red is bad, and then yellow is in between. So these categories of the buildings also can help us form the basis of the prioritization for the building replacements. So the core city service buildings would be at the kind of the top of the stack, and then the enrichment facilities with high usage would kind of be above the enrichment facilities with specific usage. So again, because buildings have a long life, a lot of the work that we do is actually more on the asset level. So it's looking at things like the HVAC units and look at the carpeting and replace those. So a way that we can help kind of financially plan out these individual steps that take place between the full asset replacements. So things like rehabilitation of an asset or even major component replacement. So these are things that are smaller than replacing the whole asset. So it wouldn't be replacing the whole HVAC unit, but it might be replacing a motor within it. So we try to build a kind of a financial plan to help go along with these, because in addition to replacing the assets as a whole, we also need to do some kind of more expensive steps in between. So we're basing the initial data on in industry kind of standard data, things like Whitestone. But the good thing about this is these, so the timelines involved and the dollars involved in these things will continue to get better as we add more data and experience to the system. So on the budget front, currently we took a 6-year average looking at the different pieces of the kind of the building budgets. So our O&M, operations and maintenance, totaled about $1 million per year. Our asset repair and replacement. So these are the things that are not full buildings, but again, the HVAC units, the carpeting, the bigger ticket items. Over the last 6 years, we've been spending approximately $300,000 per year on average. And then for full building replacement, about $1.3 million per year on average. So the initial needs assessment, and I do want to caution, these numbers are not final. Of course, we're continuing to develop the program and evolve it. The operations and maintenance showed about a $1.25 million per year need, asset repair and replacement almost a $3 million need, and full building replacement about $2.5 million per year need. So you can see the difference there is a little over $4 million from where we're at currently. So while we're not asking for policy decisions to be made this evening, we did want to just kind of bring some light to some potential future policy options. Things like looking for new funding sources, public-private partnerships. A good example of this might be the Heritage Guild operation of the Dorothy Garage, where they handle the day-to-day stuff and we're really not involved on a day-to-day basis. Perhaps even alternate levels of service, alternate service delivery methods, also looking at different risk tolerance levels, and then even potentially divestment of certain assets and/or buildings. So just a quick summary of some of the initial financial findings and some of the steps we're going to be taking coming up. So back in June, we brought in the pavement system, and the initial results there were looking for about $2.7 million a year in additional funding. The buildings that are presenting tonight look for an average of $4.1 million per year in additional funding. The future steps would be systems like the walls, the sidewalks, ramps and trees, storm drains, curbs and gutters, and that would also include waterways, parks, plazas, and landscape, streetlights and traffic control devices, bridges, and public artwork. I did want to make a note about the $4.1 million. The staff report had the figure $3.5 million in it. We've continued to kind of sharpen our pencils and look more closely at it, and we are coming up with a $4.1 million right now. But again, I do want to caution that these numbers will continue to change as we progress. So tonight, staff's asking for the council to approve a risk-based prioritization methodology, the building criticality groups, and the building replacement criteria. And just a note, of course, that the program's going to continue to develop over time, so we anticipate that there will continue to be some enhancements and changes. Staff and the consultant, are both here for questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you very much. Questions?
Yeah,
Councilmember Warner?
Got a question or observation. I would have thought that our streets were our biggest problem. So I find it a little surprising that the buildings are, twice the amount.
Well, if you look back to our list, we actually have a couple of things that would normally fall into streets, but we've carved them out separately. So when we come back and add in sidewalks, you see that number was going to go up a bunch. And so if you put back things, in other words, so we did pavement, which is part of your street, but we have sidewalks, ramps, trees, then you also have street lights and traffic control devices. So part of it is we don't want to be misleading, but we've only done a tiny part of what normal people consider streets. So that number's going to grow.
Well, yeah, and but some of those things, although I guess I'm not totally normal, because I wouldn't have put some of those into the streets necessarily, but in terms of the...
And the reason that staff does is because those are eligible to use gas tax related sources.
Okay.
So that's why that's why staff thinks in a very funny way.
So thanks, because that's a clarification. But I'm still surprised, and is it because we've neglected the buildings more or something, and that you wouldn't anticipate $4.1 million forever? Is that what we're saying, to maintain the buildings, or is this got any kind of catch up in it?
Well, you actually would assume that number, and the way we've done it is we've issued a bond for $15 million for a new city hall. We issued debt for $4 or $5 million to complete a fire station, and so part of this is we haven't fallen behind as far as we could have because we've done these big leaps of catch up, but we've not thought about it systematically of putting this sort of money in here. And the other thing you're seeing in there is, on average recently, we've been underfunding. And of course, part of that's the recession and part of that is institutional. So while you've got a lot of newer facilities, you showed a lot of green on your essentials there. As we go through and look at the other classes of buildings, you'll see that they're not in as quite a good shape. And you'll see a few of your essential buildings are in pretty horrible shape. So from that perspective, this is sort of I think a more complete way to think about, what we should be budgeting rather than every once in a while having these fairly large chunks, being expected to fall from the sky.
I've been an advocate of doing this, so I really thank you for making this progress. So then the next question, of course, is what's the right, coming back with recommendations on what's the risk tolerance or what's the asset maintenance quality, you know, what the end state, you know, the state of the asset that is acceptable. And how does this actually ever make total sense then, right? Because you can't run the deficit of not funding this for very long. I mean, you can continue to do it for a while, but at some point you got to pay the piper on this. So what's the long-term plan that makes sense? I mean, you guys were able to do it on a couple of things. And so then how long do you think it'll take to actually get something that will fit within the budget and allow us to feel somewhat reasonable about what we're doing here?
Okay, so I'll start with what's the long-range plan. We had promised that within 18 months we'll get back to you with what the net need is for each of the general fund assets, and at that time we expect to bring to you policy options for trying to balance resources and assets. Depending on what the asset is, for instance, on pavement management, we were lucky. We passed Measure BB that almost doubled our revenue sources for pavement management. It was a regional measure. Ta-da! We got money from heaven. The state is now considering additional funding for pavements. That may be something that we get done over the next couple of years, but it's not really at the local level. On the other hand, on the building resources, we may, because we don't have a lot of outside funding sources coming into that, we may have to seriously consider options such as having more nonprofit agencies taking over some of our non-essential facilities and coming to some kind of balance there, and maybe actually divesting of others. Putting out the policies and getting them approved is a step that can occur relatively simply. Actually implementing all of those steps will probably take multiple years, and I'm telling you 5 to 10 year program probably to get through actual policy implementation.
So, you know, when you first think about it and the numbers that were, talked about just using book depreciation, all those kind of things, it was like unmanageable. Now this kind of more realistic look at it, I'm getting the impression from what you just said that there's some chance that this is manageable or not.
It will be painful. I mean, you know, your staff is programmed to try and make this to be possible, to put you within the realm of possibility, to give you policy trade-offs. The council is going to have to prioritize. I mean, there's just no, you know, so part of this is going to come down to is we're going to have some facilities that we may, you know, run closer to fail. If they're a non-essential building, it might just not have an HVAC system in the summertime. It may have a portable air conditioner stuck in a window.
So we're experimenting with this facility.
We are experimenting with that concept. So in other words, you'll see more of that. Our essential facilities, we will try and keep running at an appropriate level because they're essential for government to function. And the other stuff, you'll see stuff that's not ideal. And I believe that those sort of trade-offs will be placed before this council in the future on that. The flip side of that is a long-term adjustment about how many dollars we set aside on an annual basis to take care of our assets. And, you know, you've gotten the hint it's going to be more, you know, and there's two parts. I mean, on the one hand, if it was such a huge number and it was not possible to do anything, it would kind of almost let us off the hook. I think, unfortunately, it's just going to be really painful. And with tough choices and a lot of set aside, we may be able to manage in the long term. That's supposed to come out sounding more hopeful. Sorry about that. With tough choices and good prioritization, you know, you may be able to maintain the vast bulk of your assets at an acceptable level, but I think it's almost certain that some of your assets will either need to be owned by somebody else, maintained by somebody else, or maintained at a different level. There's just really not any way to sort of have everything be, you know, a gold standard sort of maintenance across the board. We just don't have that kind of assets.
Not many other cities are actually stepping up to reality in this, are they yet?
Just like a lot of your long-term asset management, including OPEB and other things, you know, the systematic look at sort of doing this is something that very few cities have done.
Okay, well, and thank you for doing it.
Any other questions, comments
Just
at this point?
a quick comment, and I think it was, whose idea was it to start this asset management review? I see a grin down there, so I think, and no, thank you for coming up with that idea, because I don't think I've ever thanked you, but at least not publicly. It really, the sooner we get this information out, the better. Because it's when we start to look at funding options, it'll be critical to get this information out to the public so we can get the input as to what the community's direction should be for some of these items, because they will. I see some of them growing. In particular, I have to ask about storm drains. If that assessment will include any future permit compliance actions.
It won't be guessing what future requirements will be, but
Right.
it will incorporate all the current ones.
Current
under
future,
the, yeah.
which
Right.
I've never seen 5-year permit terms stretch 25 plus years, but that's what they do currently. And what scares me, at least with is of a great concern with some of the storm drain items, it's not just the capital, it's the ongoing O&M. That's where you really start to feel the pain. And I don't know if we've really talked about it too much up here, but pardon the day job creeping in. But one of the goals is to have all the cities in the Bay Area 100% trash capture by, is it 2020? I'm blanking right now.
The MRP, and also the monitoring required by the MRP.
The monitoring with PCBs and mercury, that 100% trash capture is a scary number. It's easy for them to achieve 40% or maybe even 60%, but to get to that 100%, it gets far more expensive the more you go. So the higher you go up that percentage chart. So that's of concern. I think we're going to be surprised by the storm drain and curb and gutter aspect of it as well. So I think it's great that we're looking at this big picture. I would hope that this kind of picture would help with the decision makers that are developing these permits, where we can finally say, hey, look, here is the big picture, here's what we have, and we don't have the funding sources to maintain what you're asking us to do, but it will help us with the case if we do have to go out for different funding sources, either local, state, federal, whatever level. So I'm really glad. Thanks for the suggestion. I'm encouraged by the work. And also, the camp committee, have they had a goal or a discussion on public outreach and how to reach out to the community about getting this message out? Because it's not, it's again, it's not, you could post it on Nextdoor. Local government isn't really social, so it's hard to use social media to get the word out, but any kind of public participation ideas that committee can come up with would be greatly appreciated at this point. So thank you. Thanks for all the work.
Yeah, some of the estimates that I saw for the monitoring were in excess of $1 million a year.
Oh, it's
$1 million a year.
They want us to track and collect PCBs Bay Area wide, which is the equivalent of a 6-pound bag of sugar. So if you can imagine taking that 6-pound bag of sugar, spreading it throughout the Bay Area, then accounting for each grain of sugar.
And then it also took into consideration the construction debris.
Yep.
And then coming up with a number just really out of thin air with no basis in scientific fact whatsoever.
And assigning each municipality to come up with their own code enforcement for removal of hazardous materials.
Of an imaginary number.
Right, instead of going through the state. We can go on and on. I got the MRP on the iPad. That's why I bought the extra capacity to hold things like that.
And just for everybody that was feeling really good with the general fund reserves, the unassigned reserves of $11.4 million, we all felt really good about that. We're looking at the total of $6.75 million per year initial needs assessments. So that whole unassigned reserve is gone in less than 2 years. So this is going to be, as the city manager pointed out, it's going to be painful.
And that's only on a partial list.
Right, yeah.
By the time you get the full list, it'll probably be gone in less than a year.
Right. So, once again, there's no extra money.
Would you rather feedback?
Yeah, certainly. Vice Mayor.
Really appreciate how far you've come and what you have left to go. Certainly understand probability, consequences, and weighting in this industry. One suggestion for you and staff to think about, and at some point the prioritization does become value-based. It's going to be a council staff decision. I would submit that in your green, yellow, red, your macro simplification, that some things definitely weigh more than another. For example, in my book, and I've seen a lot of institutions over my decades in government, forget about high public and employee occupancy sites, and that their health and safety is more paramount than keeping something code compliant because the code was updated to the next generation of best practice. A cosmetic repair for a stained carpet is different than a trip and fall situation that can't be fixed any longer. So I would hope that in the future you keep in mind the humans that use the facilities, and fresh air and sanitation and those issues, in my mind, become paramount. If you reach a building that's got a bunch of greens, but there's just one big red or yellow thing, that may be the repair dollars, not replacement, but the repair dollars. So then on your cash flow up on the top line, you average $4 million per year. You might want to look back if that number doesn't include it and look at your debt service over time. And then propose the future policy that says, we spend X per year comprised of cash outflow budgeted in the CIP and Z, which is just debt service. And every time we use up a round of debt service, we're just going to reissue another round. But for 50 years, there's always going to be a debt service slice to the major replacements, and you break that down for folks. And then also, as you put this, Doug, in the future budgets and talk with the public about the priorities, you can't look at every one of these silos as their own priority. And preaching to some of the choir here, if your fire trucks don't pump water, if your police cars don't start and patrol, having a building edge closer to being out of code compliance isn't as important. But I would put the health and safety of the building's occupants in the same category that a police car can't start and a fire truck doesn't pump, and a streetlight technician can't get to a broken signal intersection and have the tools and the computer equipment to repair it. So it's all of these infrastructure priorities. It's not just the building piece, the stormwater piece, the streets piece. But you're going in the right direction. But I wanted to give you that feedback that I think within your scoring, there's some essential things to health and safety that ought to get a preferential set of points.
Also, you were talking about vital services, and I was looking through the different matrices, and did not see the wastewater treatment plant. That's the enterprise? Okay,
Enterprise.
Okay, got it.
Not general fund funded.
Yeah, I saw the buildings and I think, okay, but that's right. That's the enterprise. Great, thank you. I do have a card. John Stein.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. I think it was a wonderful report, and I noticed there were two buildings that seemed to be almost all red and yellow. One, I think, is this building, and I was wondering what the second one was.
The barn.
The barn, okay.
It meets capacity and function.
But it doesn't meet codes. And, but the other thing is, building lifetime is more related to usability than structure. I mean, there are wooden buildings in Scandinavia that are 1,500 years old, and there are concrete and stone buildings that are 2,000 years old, just like there are sewer lines the same way. But I think this building, it was not designed to be a permanent building. It had a 30-year life and was built in 1979, so it's reaching the end of its life. The city manager also said $15 million for a new city hall. I believe that also included a parking structure as well. The city hall was only supposed to be $6 million. But one of my concerns is the railroad depot. There was a contract being let to relocate it to make room for the condos. It was in the newspaper, and I was wondering if the city is going to retain ownership and maintenance requirements. If it goes to LAFTA, they really have no historical commitment to anything. I mean, it's not part of their mission. And being, in a more secluded place, it will probably be more subject to vandalism. And so I was wondering if the city will still be responsible for maintenance. The other thing I think is that overall, having blanket, delivery services, having blanket contracts for maintenance, for plumbing, electrical, might be a way to reduce costs. I know I've worked at a number of facilities where essentially they have a company that has 1 or 2 people that are essentially dedicated to a contract, and they're responsible for, in this case, citywide maintenance, rather than doing it on a project-by-project basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Mr. City Manager, would you care to comment on the depot?
Yeah. So the train depot will remain ours. We are leasing it for very nominal amount to LAFTA, and the maintenance responsibilities are split. The interior maintenance is for the area that they're using. They'll be responsible for. The city is responsible for exterior maintenance.
Okay, and the blanket contracts, have we looked at anything like that?
Yeah, the maintenance division does have blanket contracts in a variety of areas, and actually one of them was even passed this evening, kind of a handyman general facilities maintenance contract.
Who we see it around here a lot, doing everything that we need to keep going. Right.
And I do want to clarify one of my earlier comments. The $15 million number that I was referring to was actually the City Hall expansion that happened 15 years ago and renovation. It wasn't related to any proposed meeting facility or parking facility that's currently being discussed. That was a historical
just the expansion.
That was a historical number. That was the last time we did that, and we funded that through bond proceeds through a certificate of participation. It was an example.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, no further comments. So do I have a motion to approve the risk-based prioritization? Moved by Councilmember Warner.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Spadowski. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much. Some tremendous work, and looking forward to more good work in the future. Thank you. And again, sends my best wishes to the camp committee, because they're doing a lot of work, and this was a big task. Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm asked to reorder the program and the agenda, so we're going to go to 6.02, and that is the community choice aggregation. And with that, Councilmember Warner is going to recuse himself. All right.
I think you should stay for better submission.
Yeah. He and I went to the same meeting, so I can report out on that one. Thank you. Okay, we have Judy Erlinson is going to be the staff member on this 6.02. Thank you.
So good evening, Mayor Marchand and members of the City Council. I'm Judy Erlinson, Public Works Manager. Item 6.02 requests that the City Council consider participation in the Alameda County Community Choice Aggregation Program, now called East Bay Community Energy. So in June 2014, the Alameda County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to explore the creation of a Community Choice Aggregation Program, or CCA for short. CCA programs enable local jurisdictions to procure electricity on behalf of customers within their borders, with the goal of promoting renewable energy, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and providing electricity rates that are competitive with the local utility. A 39-member CCA steering committee has met monthly during the past 2 years and includes stakeholders from environmental and social justice organizations, labor, and regional government. Councilmember Spadowski is the City of Livermore's representative on the steering committee. The Livermore City Council considered the draft JPA agreement on June 27, 2016, and provided comments. And on May 9th and October 10th, 2016, the Livermore City Council received a presentation from Alameda County staff and consultants regarding the proposed CCA program. The JPA, known as the East Bay Community Energy Authority Joint Powers Agreement, was prepared by the Office of County Counsel and has been extensively reviewed by city attorneys and the membership of the steering committee. The comments provided by the Livermore City Council in June have been considered and addressed in the final draft of the JPA. The final draft of the JPA was approved by the Alameda County Board of Supervisors on October 4th, 2016. The final JPA language includes a complete set of operating principles and roles and responsibilities, and there's a few here I'd like to highlight. So the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors of the authority is made up of a representative from each member agency and an alternate. Both must be members of the City Council or governing board. Voting. The authority Board of Directors can act by a majority vote in favor of an item. In the case of a tie, or if three directors request, an authority action must also be approved by a voting shares vote. This would be where each director's vote represents that share of the JPA's overall electrical load represented by the member entity. And withdrawal. There are a few scenarios which can allow member agencies to withdraw from the JPA prior to launch. So if after receiving proposals from the power providers, rates are not competitive with PG&E. 2, if greenhouse gas emissions are not lowered compared to PG&E. Or 3, if less qualified renewable energy would be provided relative to PG&E. After launch, a member agency may withdraw upon request or after an amendment to the JPA and by giving 180 days notice. It's important to note that if Livermore were to withdraw after launch, Livermore would be responsible for any stranded costs. These are costs incurred by the authority resulting from a member exiting the JPA. These costs are unknown at this time and could potentially be significant. Staff recommends the City Council consider participation in the Alameda County CCA program. If the City Council opts to participate, an ordinance must be adopted and the JPA agreement must be signed by December 31st, 2016. Thank you for your consideration, and both city and county staff are available for any questions.
We're a small group up here. Since you are our representative, do you have any questions at this point?
I've been through so many steering committee meetings, and also like to thank Judy for attending the majority of them as well. I have no questions.
Okay. So
comments maybe later, but no questions at this point.
A couple of questions here. Okay, so you defined stranded costs, but it was talking about low-income communities and having power generated from within low-income. What is the definition of a low-income community? Low-income community.
So at this point, the JPA does not define low-income community. It could refer to rates that would be comparable to income-based discounts through PG&E, some of those types of programs. Some of the more environmentally sensitive or environmental justice considerations for locations of perhaps future renewable energy providers or generators, those types of
Yeah, because it said spurring equitable economic development and increased resilience, promoting personal and community ownership of renewable resources, especially in low-income communities.
It could perhaps mean that the power providers would receive a preferential treatment, I guess, if they were to recruit from low-income or disadvantaged communities.
What struck me, though, is it was talking about the community ownership of the renewable resources in low-income communities. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about the low-income community owning these renewable resources, but then how would they have the capital to acquire something like that? So I thought it was a real interesting talking about the ownership of these resources by the low-income community.
Hi, I'm Bruce Jensen, Alameda County CDA. With me is Mr. Seth Baruch. He's from our consulting team. We can try and answer this question, although we don't know for certain exactly how this will play out either. It's possible that what would happen is that the JPA could say, okay, we have a low-income community in this location, we would like someone to make a proposal to construct a facility in this location, and the facility could be designed to be eventually owned by this low-income community. We are not sure exactly how this would happen. This is language that has been floated as a possible policy position by advocates through the steering committee process. It will be up to the JPA to decide how they prioritize that and whether they want to work toward that direction. I'm not sure if Mr. Baruch has any further ideas on this. It's something that the JPA would have to take up on their own once they're formed. But that's a very good question.
Yeah, but it's when we're talking about being responsible for the stranded costs, and yet the number one priority of this is to produce energy that's lower in price or lower in cost or competitive with the current provider. But yet one of my concerns is if some of these interests are mutually exclusive. For example, you've got using the priority of the renewables, low costs, reducing consumption goals, and yet one of the ways you could reduce consumption is by raising the price. Would obviously lower the consumption. So you got mutually competing goals. The number one priority is to provide lower cost energy, and yet there are a number of terms that aren't defined, and yet Livermore could be on the hook for these stranded costs, even if the authority doesn't provide the number one priority. So this is some of the things that I'm kind of struggling with here, is that there's a lot of things that are unanswered, but yet Livermore still may be on the hook for, as Ms. Erlandson said, significant costs if the authority doesn't meet the goals that they've promised.
Well, in the beginning, that's a very good point. In the beginning,
here comes the cavalry.
Yeah, as Judy expressed, in the beginning, if at the outset the JPA is not able to procure energy that can be completely competitive with PG&E or does not do better than PG&E in terms of renewable portfolio, or does not exceed carbon-free emissions compared to PG&E, Livermore or any other community could pull out at no cost, with no fault to them. And any community.
It's up to 180 days.
That's prior to launch, I believe.
It's 30 days.
So prior to launch. So prior to launch, well, if they haven't launched, how do we know what the prices are going to be?
You negotiate your contracts. You figure out what your costs are going to be.
Okay.
You figure out what your load base will be, and then you can use that to determine the rates for ratepayers. And then at that point, you can then launch. So launch would be after all that happens.
So the contract would be signed before that.
Right. You would know the cost beforehand.
Okay. All right. Somewhere along the line, I got to know what the costs are going to be, but that's where the contract comes in. But the contract doesn't come in until we form the JPA. Okay. All right. Got it.
Can I just? I just want to address.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't necessarily conflate this community ownership concept with the stranded costs concept, because if there are community solar projects, they're likely to be very small scale. They may be owned by members of the community, and they may be in low-income areas. They may not be in low-income areas. That would be sort of a program feature, I think, of the community choice program. Where the big money comes in and where the stranded cost issue becomes more relevant is the initial wholesale market purchases of electricity, particularly early on as the program launches, where the program would contract, before a lot of local resources are developed, the program would contract with an energy service provider. Now, if a particular city were to withdraw,
after those contracts
after the contract is signed, and then the program is saddled with those costs, then that could be where the issue might arise. Now, I get this question a lot, and what I've told people is, a lot of these contracts are some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term. But if a program were to, if a city were interested in withdrawing from the program, the more notice they give, the longer they wait for some of these contracts to expire, the lower these costs would be. So this is somewhat controllable, I think, on the part of the jurisdiction that would choose to withdraw from the program.
And if
don't
I
know
could
that's
add
helpful.
one comment, I think you were referring to the recitals with the promote personal and community ownership of renewable resources, spurring equitable economic development and increased resilience, especially in low-income communities.
Yes.
As you commonly refer to as, it's sausage making 101.
Yeah.
With some of these recitals, we had many community groups and partners asking for specific language. I think this particular recital could have been worded slightly better, because I think the promote personal and community ownership of renewable resources, period, that's a goal, spurring equitable economic development and increased resilience, especially in low-income communities. So I don't think it really was the intent for community ownership in low-income. It was more of the, if I remember correctly, the equitable economic development and increased resilience, focusing on the low-income communities. So it wasn't necessarily the ownership; it was more of the equity.
Okay, all right.
Making
Gotcha.
sure the
Yeah.
rich
1101.
necessarily right, exactly.
Okay.
So it's there was a lot of back and forth.
Okay,
over language.
very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. My comfort level just went way up here. Okay, so it's all good. Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Okay, I do have two cards. I'm going to open the public hearing. Mr. Jensen and also Kyoko Takayama. Mr. Jensen, you want to?
I will go ahead and waive my time.
Okay, since you already answered the questions, appreciate that. Ms. Takayama.
Thank you. My name is Kyoko Takayama. I live in Livermore over 25 years. And the first time I heard about this project was back in 2013. And I did have a meeting with you.
Yes, we did.
And at that time,
Couple
it
of
was a very, very big dream. And I'm very happy to actually see this on the agenda today in Livermore Council. And I have been part of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance, along with volunteers in Troy Valley progressives. So I'm part of the group who inserted that particular languages in this part. And yes, just like Councilmember Svedowski commented, our intention was actually just to empowerment and just direct the power to concentrate to the lower income community, not particularly really owning something. That's something I wanted to just add on. But for the program, we really would like City of Livermore to join. And part of the reason is this program is thought to be one of the very powerful vehicle to combat climate change. And part of the reason is in any other program, we have to depend on the funding on tax revenues, just like we have been talking all night today. But this one is actually based on the ratepayers' money is the source of this program. And so far, Marine Clean Power and Sonoma County's program both are very successful. And I don't see any reason not to. And I would like this city to be a part of the leadership to kind of make this vision come true. And that is, I think, extension of what the city of Livermore have been doing last few years. So I do hope we actually join this JPA. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Takayama. Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public comment period. Any comments at this point? Since you're the lead on that, I'll let you take the lead.
Sure, and we've discussed this at several meetings, but it does come down to, I believe, choice, climate change, and local control. What we didn't mention, and we've mentioned at every meeting, is residents will have the option to opt out and stay with PG&E should they choose to do so. I am comfortable with moving forward with this, and I would throw out, I'd like to throw out I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the East Bay Community Choice Authority Joint Powers Agreement dated October 4th, 2016. And I think we have to take them in order. We can't do both at the same time, because if the first one fails, then we can't really do the second. So
Separate actions would be helpful.
okay. So there you go. That's the motion and my comments.
Second.
Any other comments? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously.
Okay. And then I guess the you make a motion for the introduction of the ordinance. Okay.
That's correct.
So then I would like to move that we introduce by first reading an ordinance amending the Livermore Municipal Code to participate in the East Bay Community Choice Energy Program.
Just one clarification on that. Even though it does say amending the municipal code in the agenda, this is an uncodified ordinance.
All right.
Okay. Motion, second by Vice Mayor. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. It passed unanimously. Very good. It's been a long process. Thank you very much for all of your work on that. Councilor Spadowski, thank you very much. I know it's been a lot of meetings and a lot of hearings.
Interesting.
And a lot of comments.
Lots to learn and continue to learn about the process, and it's very interesting.
And there's still a lot left to go on that.
A lot left to go.
So appreciate that. And Mr. Jensen, Mr. Baruch, thank you. And Ms. Erlandson, thank you very much for your work on that as well. Okay. With that, I believe we are on to 7.01. This is matters initiated and council reports. Councilor Spadowski.
Okay. I just have a few meetings to report. I can collect them all into one report there. LAFTA Board of Directors, I'm happy to report that the Las Positas Pass program, which we recently implemented with the route change, is continuing to grow stronger and stronger. We're getting more participation from Las Positas students now that we have a route that goes directly to Las Positas. We're expecting a good amount of ridership there. And also we have a school pass program. It's a pilot program. I believe it's through MTC. I'm not sure of the partner, the funding agency, but that's also showing some good ridership as well. The other item that I wanted to report out is I don't know what to call it, but the Downtown Finance Foundation Research Committee. I don't know. I have to come up with a name first, I think, probably, yeah.
With some of that was
right.
That was right after the
exactly
the Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance Forum at the Bankhead Plaza, and I saw you there actually.
Yep.
And,
it's a great group.
You're going to check in and see what the capacity or the interest was in working on with some of the existing foundations or nonprofits to work
generate
in
some
downtown.
interest in downtown. And I've been doing a bit of research, a bit of legwork before I ask anybody to actually meet. But I'm finding that there are funding opportunities out there for what they're calling smart communities. And I know this is, it's something that we need to research, but it's communities that are connected or encourage, transit ridership, and also using technology to increase that, with Uber and Lyft and things like that.
Streets.
So I know there are few funding opportunities, and who knows what's going to happen with the change in national administration for some of these programs, but that's definitely an opportunity. And there's also something called startup communities. It's something that I'm just now learning about, and we'll try and gather some more information for the future. But it's basically, as you would think about supporting people for startup businesses, it's supporting people for startup housing. So it may, there may be different funding options out there for that kind of community. So still working on it. I expect, after the holidays, maybe we'll get some more traction, because people seem to be kind of lethargic after Thanksgiving and all the tryptophan.
Food coma.
Yeah, food coma. And then also I wanted to, my last item, or an item to initiate, or something that we should put on the radar maybe for the goals and priorities setting. Mr. Anderson spoke tonight about traffic and speeding. I do think that we are getting more and more concerned residents voicing their issues with whatever it may be with people. What Mr. Anderson explained tonight, I drive that same route, and I have experienced people crossing over double yellows to pass me up as I'm waiting, because they're going on North Front to avoid the Altamont pass and go up through North Front to Tracy or wherever. But it would be nice in the future to have a discussion about our enforcement levels. And then also, did we reinstitute, or at one point we had a residential traffic calming program? What's the status of the RTC?
You do not have a calming program at the current time that is funded.
Okay,
So that could also be part of your goal setting.
And that, that could involve things such as, lane narrowing to slow down traffic. I actually managed a residential traffic calming program as my full-time job for about 3 years. We also, we also checked out radar guns for residents, because often when people are saying that somebody's doing 50 down my street, you give them a radar gun for a week and they realize, wait a minute, that's 35. I did speed surveys for a city, and after you sit out hours in a car surveying hundreds of cars, you start to get the knack for determining speeds. So, that might be something that we can do. But also, I've heard of some police departments, and it'd be great to get the chief's feedback on this, is that when somebody is certified as a motor officer, if they are put back on patrol, in some situations, if there are extra motorcycles or opportunities for them to, ride a shift as a motor officer, some police departments allow that to happen, because I do believe that, and at least for me, growing up, you knew where all of you knew that one street. You better not speed down there because there's always that cop on that corner. And there's a cost associated with that, and I'm painfully aware of that. But if we can get back to some of the levels of enforcement, and I understand the last meeting that I attended in October, we actually applied for a grant for traffic enforcement, if I recall correctly, under the consent calendar. So I think it's a discussion that we should have in the near future, because I'm seeing it as well. And as our population continues to grow and commutes get worse, people take shortcuts, and it's very bad during commute times. I don't think it's constantly like that throughout the city, but during that portion of the day, it could be an issue. So.
And the other thing is, it's not just growth within Livermore. It's
Right.
also a lot of those folks that are speeding through town are actually coming from over the hill.
Yep.
Or Brentwood and the like. So it's
80% of the residents commute out, and 80% of our employees commute in.
Yeah.
So it's
So we just, if that one-to-one jobs housing balance, if we just have the people that live here, work here.
Right.
And that's a good point.
I think it's a worthy discussion.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Gavey?
Just one meeting to report out, and actually there's no report out. The monthly meeting of the Livermore Downtown Inc. Board occurred last week, and nothing to report out.
Okay. November 16th, I attended the Livermore Police Department Volunteer Appreciation Dinner, as did Councilmember-elect Carling. He was there as well. It's always great to see all the folks that have stepped up and continue to volunteer their time for the community, and it's a very small token of appreciation that we have to recognize them. November 17th was the LAVMA meeting. I was there with Councilmember Werner. We had the operations report. We also had a closed session GM performance review and the audit and financial reviews as well. November 18th, I was at an all-day transportation retreat. Alameda County Transportation Commission, along with Sherry Sheets and Bob Vinn were there. Had legislation overview, some policy overviews, and also had an opportunity to look at some of the projects that were being done within the community. So a lot of good information, and we continue to move forward on projects that are being funded by Measure B and Measure BB, and still working on BART to Livermore and getting some traction on that. And with that, I have no further business. Meeting adjourned.